Hello students, today we will be discussing regionalism in India, a conceptual analysis. The objective behind today's discussion is to give you an understanding of the genesis of regionalism in India, the different dimensions of regionalism, as well as to give you an insight about regionalization of politics in India. For the convenience of our understanding, I have divided the entire topic into a number of segments. We would first start with the dynamics of region and regionalism. Then we would move on to features of regionalism, types of regionalism, different dimensions of regionalism, factors leading to the rise of regionalism in India, and finally, the impact of regionalization on Indian politics. Students, regionalism is a potent force in Indian politics. It is time to understand why. Regions are extremely conscious of their identities, and we find different regional movement based on language, class, caste, culture, ethnic identities dotting the Indian landscape. Now, India being a plural and a multicultural society, regionalism is rooted in India's manifold diversity. Diversity of languages, cultures, tribe, community, and fostered by the deep sense of attachment to the region. Even after various phases of territorial reorganization, since 1950s, most regions of the country contain many sub-regions marked by some social and cultural identity symbols. In India, regionalism denotes an acute sense of loyalty to the particular region, manifested in a negative connotation fueled by a sense of enduring deprivation due to uneven development. Regionalism, spearheaded through regional movements, have often challenged legitimacy of the state. Now, regionalism, how did it emerge and what does its concept imply? Regionalism is a significant type of some territorial loyalty. Administrative divisions or provinces at times generate a degree of loyalty separate from identification with the national identity. Seligman and Johnson have identified regionalism with a counter movement to any exaggerated or aggressive form of centralization. The term has been used to emphasize cultural and economic distinctiveness. Regionalism in the Indian context generally refers to assertion of distinct ethnic, linguistic, or economic interest by various groups within the nation. Since regional consciousness is based on linguistic, economic, ethnic, and cultural identities of people living in a specific geographical area, political scientists have chosen to treat economic regionalism, linguistic regionalism, political regionalism, and even sub-regional movements in the general frame of regionalism. Let us try to understand the core idea of region, and then we would move on to regionalism. To understand the concept of region, let us first try to understand whether it is just a geographical unit or not. In the literal sense, region refers to a geographical unit within a defined territory. Region, however, has other connotations. As a social system, region reflects the relationship between different human beings and groups. Regions are an organized cooperation in cultural, economic, political, or other fields. Region acts as a subject with a distinct identity, and that identity may be language, culture, religion, caste, or tradition. Regionalism follows from this concept of region. It is an ideology and a political movement that seeks to advance the cause of the region. Now, let us try to bring about the relationship between region and regionalism. Now, regionalism is a process which sub-state actors become increasingly powerful and power devolves from central level to regional governments. These are the regions within the country distinguished, as I had already said, in terms of culture, language and other socio-cultural identifiers. If the interest of one region or a state is asserted against the country as a whole or against another state or region in a hostile way, and if a conflict is promoted by such alleged interests, then it can be called regionalism. If someone is aspiring to make a special effort to develop one state or region or to remove poverty or make social justice, then that cannot be called regionalism, students. Any demand for a separate state, autonomous region or devolution of powers from the central level and to the state level is sometimes confused with regionalism, but that is not regionalism. Devolution of powers from the center to the state is never regionalism. Now, let us come to the features of regionalism. A region is a nucleus of social aggregation for a variety of purposes, that might be culture, language, tribe, ethnicity, etc. A particular territory is set apart over a period of time when different variables operate in a different degree. The variables may be geography, topography, religion, language, culture, tribe, customs, socio-political realities, political stages of development, different degrees of development, common historical tradition, experiences, in fact a common way of living, or maybe something more than that. A widely prevalent sentiment of togetherness develops within the people of the region, and this in course of time, this we feeling, this togetherness gives rise to regionalism. At the core of regionalism, students, there is a profound sense of identity, which is real, which is very dear and close to the people. And this feeling of identity is based on a cultural identifier. Now, there are cultural realities and people just do not wish to sacrifice them away at the cost of national identity. Furthermore, a region can be understood as a territorial unit within which a particular dialect, ethnic group, social or cultural institution thrives upon. Now, the concept of regionalism at times appear to be quite ambiguous. Let us try to clarify the different ambiguities associated with the term regionalism. There are scholars who regard regionalism as a threat to national integration and unity. On the other hand, there are scholars who view that regionalism inculcates a strong feeling of loyalty and togetherness in the people, which is highly impactful in generating political participation through regional mobilization. It often involves ethnic groups whose aims include independence from national state, development of their political power. In the Indian context, regionalism refers to assertion of distinct ethnic, linguistic and economic interest by various groups within the country. Since regionalism is rooted in linguistic, ethnic, cultural identities of the people living in a specific territorial unit, political scholars have treated various forms of regionalism in terms of economic, political, linguistic, cultural, etc. And we find that from these different factors, regional movements stem. Now, students, there are two important approaches to the study of regionalism. Why regional movements have become so popular? One is the core periphery approach and the other one is the sons of the soil approach. Let us start by understanding what is the core periphery approach. Underlying reason for regionalism is the antagonistic and exploitative relationship between the core communities and the peripheral communities. The uneven diffusion of administrative infrastructure, means of communication, educational benefits during the colonial rule affected the growth and development patterns of different regions in the country. Some communities acquired more advantages than others and turned into core communities, while apathy and jealousy against them characterized peripheral sub-communities. History, language, culture, tribe, ethnicity, economic development became the basis of identity assertion or differences between the core advantageous community and the peripheral disadvantaged community. Most of the sub-regional movements which India is experiencing today and has experienced in the past evolve around the conviction of the peripheral group feeling that they have been exploited by the core communities. Internal colonialism by the core communities over the peripheral is said to be the most important factor behind the rise of regionalism in India. Let us move on to the next approach, student, the sons of the soil approach. This theory implies that indigenous population of a particular territory has a special collective territorial right and is vested with some sort of ownership over the territory. The outsiders or the migrants who come to live in that territory cannot and should not have equal claims to the services and benefits available within that area. Within such a preconceived notion, the locals view with displeasure the flow of migrants and outsiders into the region, who in most of the cases are more enterprising, more skilled and better equipped. As a result, what happened? Jobs and economic opportunities go to these outsiders or migrants. Now, shrinking economic opportunities and limited resources makes the sons of the soil, the original inhabitants of the place, hostile to outsiders. So, the political implication of such hostilities is the imposition of pressure upon the authorities to secure legal protection of their rights and restrain the flow of outsiders. It is imperative to note that the Assamese movement or the anti-foreigners movement in 1980 in Assam was one of those movements which was based on the sons of the soil theory that Assam is for Assamese. Similarly, we have the sons of the soil movement articulated in Maharashtra, where Marathis feel that they have the first right to jobs and economic resources within the state. Based on this two approaches, let us try to understand the different types of regionalism. According to noted scholar Iqbal Narayan, there are three major types of regionalism: suprastate regionalism, interstate regionalism and intrastate regionalism. Suprastate regionalism is built around issues of common interest in which groups of states form a common political alliance directed against either the similar alliance of other states or the union. The Dravidian movement in Tamil Nadu can be seen to be an example of such suprastate regionalism. Coming to interstate regionalism, it is coterminous with state boundaries and involves juxtaposing of one or more state identities against another on specific issues which threaten their interest. For example, the dispute over river water or boundary disputes. Intrastate regionalism, where one community is against the state in which they are situated. It aims at assuring self-identity and self-development. For example, the Gorkhaland movement carried out in Darjeeling. Regional identities in India. James Maynard, the very noted political scientist, has identified 4 distinct types of regional identities around a territorial basis. First, the regional identity is based on commonality of religion. Say the Muslims in the Kashmir Valley, in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and the Sikhs in the case of Punjab. Second, identity is primarily based on language, like the case of the Telugus in Andhra Pradesh, the Tamils of Tamil Nadu. Thirdly, identity is based on tribal origin, the case of the Adivasis in Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, or the case of the different tribal communities inhabiting the states in Northeast. Next, we have the tribal identities among the groups residing specifically in the Himalayan area and the Northeast states who are racially different from others. Say the Nagas, the Bodos, the Metis. So, these are the 4 distinct types of regional identities based on a territory. Let us come to understand regional movements and why these regional movements have been shaped the way they have been. All the different forms of ethnicity that we have just focused on have given rise to various regional and sub-regional movements in the country. They are either demanding autonomy in the form of separate statehood or secessionism in different parts of India since independence. It follows that an all-encompassing secular national identity claiming precedence over a narrow ascriptive region-specific linguistic and cultural identities have been replaced by the increasing assertion of the latter in the form of either separate statehood or different forms of autonomy. Significantly, despite sharing a number of common features such as history, language, culture, territory, all these region-specific ethnic, cultural and linguistic identities are not necessarily potential national identities. Moreover, they also differ in the nature of demands that they make on the political process, in the sense that the larger ones, the important ones, the stronger ones may be more inclined to statehood, whereas smaller ones might just want some autonomy measures. In that case, that might be adequate representation within a state, that may be enough for smaller identities. Now, regionalism as a concept has a positive dimension as well as a negative dimension. Positive terms, it embodies a quest for self-fulfillment on the part of the people of an area. In this quest for self-fulfillment, regionalism may enthuse the people of an area to organize some movement in some form which may bring about some constructive products. It might be in the form of greater political choice on the part of the people, greater political participation, political articulation, etc. For example, the reorganization of states on the basis of language in the 1950s and 60s paved the way for constructive regionalism in India. Significant development in literature, culture of different linguistic groups, and this can definitely be taken as a very positive outcome of grant of territorial autonomy to linguistic groups. Coming to the negative aspect of regionalism, it reflects a psyche of relative deprivation resulting from a specific grievance. It upholds the demand for self-determination, secessionism and independent states. The psyche of deprivation spawns a regional attitude for fragmentation, and this fragmentation to these regional groups are a way to rectify the injustice committed on them. For example, if you look into demand for the state of Telangana, it was based on the psyche of deprivation of the people of Telangana. Let us come to the factors responsible for the rise of regionalism in India. Firstly, the regionalism as an important potent force was the cause of the efforts of the national government to impose a particular ideology, language or cultural pattern on all people and groups, compelled the regional movements to crop up. This sense of domination by the central government forced regional movements in the different parts of the country because they wanted to resist the imposition and domination from the central government. That is the reason why states in South India began to resist the imposition of Hindi as an official language, as they feared that this would lead to domination of the north. Secondly, continuous neglect of an area or a region by the ruling parties and concentration of administrative and political power has given rise to the demand for decentralization of authority and bifurcation of unilingual states. The sons of the soil theory that we had just discussed has been set forth to promote the interest of the neglected people in a particular state. Coming to the next region, apprehensions on the part of linguistic, ethnic or religious minorities in view of uniform system of administration and policies has also been the result of regionalism in India. Many of these groups dominant in specific region become suspicious as to whether their cultural ties, their ethos, their symbols, their practices and traditions would be taken care of by the Indian state or not. The next important and a very significant reason behind the rise of regionalism is uneven pattern of socio-economic development which has led to regional disparities. What is worst is the naming of these states as Bimaru: Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh. The categorization and sub-categorization of the states on the basis of socio-economic indicators have generated resentment against the national leadership. The economic causes, as I just said, uneven development of the region has led to conflicts between people and governments of the various states and within the states themselves. In the same state itself, we have various kinds of conflicts over location of projects, distribution of resources, etc. For example, Vidarbha in Maharashtra is very backward, and there has been a movement against the state itself for better economic opportunities for the people of Vidarbha. The next important factor is the elitist character of leadership and unwarranted intervention by the center in the affairs of the state has rendered the state vulnerable to regional forces. The strategic political calculations at the center and the failure of regional political parties to bargain with them has also been a cause of concern behind the rise of regionalism. Now, students, regionalism is not peculiar to Indian society only. This is a worldwide phenomena. At present day, most of the Indian states have been formed on the basis of a linguistic or a cultural identifier. In fact, there is no nation in the world which is homogeneous in all respects. In every state in India, there are regional entities which have led to the formation of a state. Regionalism in India is a result of India's profound diversity. Diversity is appearing in the form of language, culture, historical traditions, and all these identities are very sensitive to their distinctive identities. The linguistic factor gave rise to linguistic regionalism in the 50s and 60s. In fact, the passion for linguistic reorganization is not just confined to formation of linguistic states. There are conflicts within states and regions over allocation of river water, development projects, etc. Now, coming to the tribal factor as an important aspect behind the rise of regionalism. In areas, there are different regions inhabited by tribes, and each of these tribes have their own language, culture, and custom. The tribes, since the colonial times, had been isolated from mainstream society, and as such, they are quite very much associated with their own indigenous culture. So, their sense of protection of their cultural identity had given rise to tribal self-assertion movements in Northeast India. It's not just Northeast, even Northwest India has a sense of profound regionalism, where religious factor had led to the rise of regionalism. In fact, if you look into the partition of India between India and Pakistan happened on the basis of religion. Even after religion, a Sikh homeland or Khalistan was clamoured by the Sikhs in Punjab. Politicians who fail to get power at the state or national level often seek to exploit the regional sentiments to promote their very own personal interest. One of such political parties is the Telangana Rashtra Samiti, which was formed just to cater to the interest of the sense of deprivation of the Telangana people. Now, what is the connect between regionalism and regional political parties? As I have just mentioned, TRS, the emergence of increasing number of political parties representing various kinds of segmental identities and interests has resulted in a huge spectrum of ethnic and sub-ethnic, caste, subcaste, linguistic, sublinguistic permutation and combinations in the Indian political landscape. Regionalization of India's political landscape has decentralized power and has deepened country's democracy. Is there any relationship between regionalism and nationalism? Is regionalism a threat to nationalism? Let us try to understand this question. Historians of modern India have established how the growth of Indian nationalism against British colonialism since the 19th century gave birth to intense awakening among various region-based linguistic nationalities for identity and self-determination, often in opposition to pan-Indian nationalism. The mainstream Indian nationalism has continuously to grapple with regional nationalism. Given the heavyweight regional identities of the people of India, the Indian National Congress could have hardly remained immune from it in the pre-independence days. In fact, Indian National Congress was a coalition of inter-regional coalitions. Maclean argued that Indian National Congress has been since its formation in the year 1885 and forum a platform for representing regional aspirations. The regional identities within the Indian National Congress itself became very intense. As early as 1908, the INC recognized Bihar as a separate Congress circle for congruence between linguistic and political boundaries on the basis of some demands made by a political leader, Mahesh Narayan Singh, in the year 1894. Therefore, we find Indian National Congress had been accountable and responsible in a way for the development of a close sense of identity among the regions and people representing the regions. But this should not be seen as a negative connotation, students. It has also been felt that the formation of various autonomous provinces was also aided by some form of identity. In fact, the formation of Orissa as a linguistic unit or the formation of Madras Presidency, all these units were based on some form of identifier, though administrative convenience definitely played a role. It should also be noted that the Indian National Congress, which was the main party for India's freedom, had reorganized the Indian National Congress on the basis of language. So, there were different Congress Pradesh committees set up based on language. In fact, it should be noted that the rise of vigorous regionalism in various parts of the country since 1950s for recognition of identity led the scholars to predict that the country would be balkanized and the country might collapse. Selig Harrison was one of such scholars who predicted India's collapse because of so many identifiers. However, the phase of reorganization of Indian states to give due recognition to regional identities does not seem to undermine India's national unity. It is important to understand that though nationalism conventionally favors primacy of one overarching national identity, India's pluralistic nationalism celebrates the coexistence of multiple identities. What is the impact of regionalism and regionalization on Indian politics? Firstly, we find political issues becoming region specific. Secondly, leadership has become regionally structured. Thirdly, state or region specific political support base is an important factor behind the growth of regional parties. Fourthly, political choice of the voters have become limited to state or regional political theatres from the previously all India political theatres. So, people now vote and exercise their choice more in terms of regional issues than national issues. What can we conclude from today's discussion? In general, regionalism is manifested two different ways that we have already studied. Demand of the people of certain areas for secession from the Indian Union, demand of people of certain areas for separate statehood, demand of the people of certain areas for union territories, and if they are living in a union territory, the demand is to be upgraded to a separate state. Demand of certain people for favorable settlement in interstate disputes like exclusive utilization or possession of certain areas of natural resource. In a general theoretical sense, regionalism has been analyzed by broadly classifying it into the following manner: as a manifestation of center-state relations, as an outcome of internal colonialism, as a subsidiary process of political integration, in terms of the conflicts involving the political elite, as a product of the imperatives of the electoral politics, in contrast to sub-regionalism. And finally, students, in the context of increasing competitiveness among the regions in a liberalizing economy. That's all for today. Thank you.